Today, I want to have a discussion regarding the NBA ratings. It has been a relatively big talking point after the conclusion of the NBA Finals. This is from NBA Central right here. The 2024 NBA playoffs saw a significant decline in viewership compared to 2023, with ratings dropping by 11% to 2.4 and viewership by 12% to 4.53 million per Poston_SMW. This is Sports Media Watch. Nonetheless, the finals has now gone 5 years without a single game hitting the 14 million mark, a figure that even the World Series reached more recently, Game 6 in 2021. This is also an article by Forbes right here. NBA Finals hit lowest viewership in 3 years, an average of 11.3 is crazy. 11.3 million people tuned in to watch each game in the NBA Finals between the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks this year, marking this series' lowest viewership since 2021, as ratings for the NBA Finals and other big TV events struggle to return to pre-pandemic levels. The average across all 5 games was lower than 2023 and 2022's average NBA Finals rating, reportedly 11.6 and 12.4 respectively, though the figure far exceeds the 2021 series, 9.9 million viewers, and the 2020 contest, 7.5 million, both of which were 6-game series. The final game of the Celtics-Mavericks series averaged 12.2 viewers, according to ABC parent Disney, peaking at 13.2 million viewers. Game 4, in which the Mavs routed the Celtics 122-84, drew about 9.6 million viewers, marking the second lowest NBA Finals Game 4 to date, behind only a pandemic-era Game 4 that had 7.54 million viewers in 2020. Last thing right here, games 1 through 3 also had relatively low viewership by pre-pandemic standards, averaging about 10.99 million viewers, 12 million viewers, and 11.4 million viewers respectively. Pre-pandemic average series ratings were typically higher than 16 million viewers, according to SMW. Okay, so a lot of conversations going around about the NBA Finals. Is it washed? These rating conversations. We were having them last year as well, with the fact that we had a Denver versus Miami Finals and how intriguing that is, how that's going to affect the ratings. Actually, I believe the ratings were higher last year than this year. And I just want to start off by starting this conversation by saying this. This is a multifaceted conversation. Okay, I tweeted this out earlier. This is a multifaceted conversation. I think, a problem that we have in media nowadays is just trying to point fingers at one thing and trying to be hyperbolic with our takes. In actuality, so many different factors goes into why a certain thing is succeeding or failing, or both. You know what I'm saying? It could be succeeding in one area but failing at another. I feel like a lot of people in this discussion have just pointed to illegal streaming and said, hey man, everyone's on Stream East, so that's why these ratings are that bad. It's not that viewership actually went down, it's just you can't track it. So a lot of these things, there are a bunch of different factors. Now I will say this, right? Illegal streaming is a factor. I'm not gonna sit here and act like it isn't. And I think the problem with illegal streaming is we don't really know how big illegal streaming has gotten because of the nature of illegal streaming. It's illegally streamed. You know what I'm saying? You can't really track those numbers. You can't really factor those into your data. So the significance or insignificance of illegal streaming to me is just a mystery. All I know is in my personal circle, I do know a decent amount of people, I'm not about to out them out, who use illegal streaming sites to watch these games because, they don't want to pay for $80 of YouTube TV. They don't want to pay for $200 of NBA League Pass. You know what I'm saying? Especially in this economy. I don't blame them. Now, me personally, I do have YouTube TV and NBA League Pass. And, I also stream on playback, so that helps as well. I haven't missed a single game. I haven't had a lack of access to any game throughout this whole season, and I haven't used illegal streaming sites this whole season, which is a privilege. But nevertheless, I don't blame motherfuckers for using illegal streaming sites, also because a lot of these illegal streaming sites are in HD. So, they're good quality streams. For me, the NBA ratings conversation, it can start with illegal streaming. But I think there's also a bunch of factors with it as well that I want to talk about in this video. Number one, this is not a problem exclusive to the NBA. As we see with the Forbes article right here, a bunch of other big TV events have been struggling to return to pre-pandemic levels. It's not just, it's not just NBA specific, and I would like to see the data when it comes to the NFL and NHL and MLB ratings when it comes to this. But I think the things that are plaguing the NBA's problems when it comes to viewership is something going on in other sports as well. Other sports are succeeding, specifically the WNBA. We've had record numbers when it comes to March Madness, specifically with women's sports over this last couple of years. But I do think that's a completely, not saying it's an outlier, but I'm kind of saying it's an outlier. You know what I'm saying? And also just the nature of one and done playoff series versus a 7-game series. You know what I'm saying? I think the reason why on a per game basis a March Madness game has higher ratings than an NBA playoff game is the gravity of that game. You got to pay attention to that game. If you don't watch that game, there is no game 2, game 3, game 4, game 5, game 6, game 7. Every single game may be the end of your favorite team or whichever team you're paying attention to season. You got to pay attention. You know what I'm saying? And that's the same for women's college basketball, men's college basketball, the NFL. So to me, the real comparison when it comes to soccer as well, / the World Cup and all that shit. So to me, the real comparison is the NBA Finals versus the World Series versus NHL Stanley Cup, because these are 3 sports, 3 major league sports that have 7-game series. They play a lot of games in the regular season. And I would like to look at some of these numbers right here if we can find them out right now as we're recording. So I do have the 3 leagues last championship round in front of me right now. So if we look at the 2024 NBA Finals, lowest was Game 4 at 9.62 million viewers. Highest was 12.3, but the average was at around 10 to 11. If we look at the Stanley Cup, much lower viewership. We're looking at 3 to the 3-4 million range this year. And last year we're looking at 2 to 3. The year before that we're looking at 3 to 4, closer to 4, even peaked at 5.8 over here. So it looks like 2022 was a pretty good year for the NHL. And here's the World Series numbers, where we're looking at 9 to 8 million viewers last season. The season before that, it did look like there was a pretty bigger jump. We're looking at 11 to 12 million viewers right there. But I believe in the NBA, that was also a good year for the NBA in terms of ratings. So to me, the comparison really is the MLB and the NBA Finals, the MLB World Series and the NBA Finals. And I'm looking at this right now. I mean, the viewership still looks like it's in favor of the NBA. So if we're talking about the closest apples to apples comparison we can get for the NBA, the NBA relative to other leagues, it's not like, it doesn't look like it's a case of the NBA is struggling while other leagues are thriving to the nth degree. Now, if you want to compare it to the NFL, if you want to compare it to March Madness, if you want to compare it to the WNBA, I mean, I feel like those are out of context things that we would need to put into context. But looking at the NBA compared to MLB and the NHL, it does look relatively fine to me. But nevertheless, it still begs the question, why are the ratings for the NBA still lower than what they were pre-pandemic? And what are the factors that are aiding into this problem? I think one of the biggest factors into this is just in 2024, our attention is divided into so many different things compared to what media and television was in the mid-2000s to the 90s. There's so many different avenues where we can watch these games. The average person is more tech savvy nowadays, where they can, get access to illegal streaming sites. Back in the day, people didn't want to touch that. People were afraid of getting a virus that would legitimately bake their computer. and things of that nature. Nowadays, it's more safer. It's not as taboo going into these streaming sites. But also back then the channels was just, there weren't that many channels compared to nowadays. Now you got YouTube TV, you can go to Hulu, you can go to HBO Max. TikTok is taking some of our attention span. YouTube is taking some of our attention span. Other leagues are taking some of our attention span. I think compared to pre-pandemic levels, time is, our time still hasn't changed. There's still 24 hours in a day. But the things we divide those 24 hours into, in my opinion, has changed. And I think social media has been a bigger factor in that, to the point where I swear to God, some people legitimately are fine with just watching highlights after the game, because they know if they miss the game, they can just watch the highlights in a not pay-per-view, in an on-demand fashion. They don't gotta tune into Sports Center the morning after. They can just go to YouTube, check out the highlights from last night's game, and watch it. So the urgency in general for watching live sports, I don't think it's there anymore, especially compared to, pre-pandemic levels. And I understand social media has been around for a relatively long time now, but these ratings conversations were not a conversation, in the early 2000s. It was not a conversation in the 90s as much. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't as much of a conversation in 2015 and 2016, but I will talk about that next. I think the parody era for NBA diehards is fun. I really do. I think these last, I was one of the dudes complaining about the super team era in terms of, every season seems so predictable. We know who's going to be in the finals every single year. It seems like people are just playing to play, but once they run into this juggernaut, they just end up losing. And I do think, something that the NBA has held their hat on over these last 6 years is the fact that there has been a new champion for the last 6 years, and we're getting new matchups every single season. And while the NBA diehards love that, I do think from the casual perspective, it would be beneficial from a ratings perspective for us to go back to the super team era, because even in these last 6 years, the NBA finals that had the highest viewership was when the most recent super team, the franchise that held the most recent super team came back, just without KD, but Steph was still there, Clay was still there, Dre was still there, on top of going up against one of the NBA's marquee franchises in the Boston Celtics, which is why you got the combination of these ratings right here. So again, I'm going to continue watching NBA basketball because it is what I do for a living, and it is something that I genuinely love, regardless of, if there's a super team or not. But I feel like the difference between averaging 11 million viewers and, averaging 15, 17, 20 million viewers is that casual audience. I think super teams force people to pick sides. Because they know, hey, your main team becomes a side hoe, long story short. Because, by the time the NBA Finals roll around, now you got to pick a side, for real. And then by the time the NBA Finals roll around, it seems like a bigger event. It seems as if, all right, listen, I haven't been paying attention much to these playoffs so far. This regular season doesn't feel like it matters. But what does matter is when the Golden State Warriors with Steph, Clay, KD, and Draymond, or even pre-KD, goes up against LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love. You have this grand, big-ass stage with the brightest stars in the league, multiple stars on the court, and they're duking it out. Or even in the 90s, it's just, this dominant, superstar, megastar-ass dynasty in the NBA Finals. Who can stop them? And I think right now, the NBA doesn't really have that in the league, and it is hurting the viewers from that perspective, unfortunately. And it kind of goes deeper into the divided attention, theory that I had earlier, is when you have a bunch of these teams that can compete for a championship. I feel like our attention is divided into, all these different teams. It isn't just focusing on two teams the whole time, building up two teams, going into the NBA Finals, and then once the NBA Finals roll around, now it's just time for execution. I feel like the NBA media is a little bit lost on who to really push, who not to push. If they push this, are they making a mistake to not push this other person? All of these things. I feel like, when it was Steph and LeBron, we know who to push is Steph and LeBron. But right now, we're in a situation where Steph and LeBron aren't on championship contenders. They have spent a lot of time promoting these other dudes to the point where they don't really care about a Luka push. They don't really care about a Giannis push. They don't really care about a Joel Embiid push. It's kind of like the YouTuber problem of, if I can get a clear 1 out of 10 today, why wouldn't I take it? Why not talk about LeBron today? Why not talk about Steph Curry today? If we're talking about ratings, because I know if we talk about LeBron today, if we talk about Steph Curry today, that we will get a 1 out of 10 on our YouTube dashboard. And I think, unironically enough, a lot of these networks do use YouTube, and that 1 out of 10 shit, that short-term shit, is something that they genuinely probably look at in their metrics. So that's another problem as well, is the fact that y'all don't really want parity for real. I think the super team era actually did aid in much more consistent, much larger NBA Finals numbers for the NBA that I think they're struggling to get back. I think another facet of this as well is when it pertains to this specific NBA Finals, the NBA media failed to promote the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. I think in these playoffs, we spent too much trying to market Anthony Edwards to be the next Michael Jordan. I think we spent too much time throughout this whole regular season and even in the playoffs downplaying the Boston Celtics, giving people a reason to doubt them, which some of it is warranted, but a lot of it was bullshit, to the point where once they got to the NBA Finals, motherfuckers did not like the Boston Celtics. People thought that they were a fraudulent-ass team that, went through an injury-riddled run to the finals. This Mickey Mouse ring doesn't count. Just downplaying the season and how good this team actually is. And again, over on the other side, we spent too much time pushing Anthony Edwards when Luka was right there. And even going into these NBA Finals, I heard more conversations about Kyrie versus the Boston Celtics than, Luka is on pace to be like a top 10 player of all time. This is his first Finals appearance. Maybe we should have these more conversations about Luka. You know what I'm saying? Like, even with Luka, we didn't really talk about Luka until after Game 3 for bad reasons. You know what I'm saying? So for this specific Finals, I think they failed at that. The mainstream media failed at that. And as much as I will say this, I think NBA Twitter and social media is a part of NBA media nowadays. And I think, as a collective, a lot of us did not push the right players. You know what I'm saying? Luka was having a dang near historic run going into these finals, and we didn't really acknowledge it until the Dallas Mavericks closed out the deal to clinch the NBA Finals berth. Hell, even now, I've seen segments today talking about how dominant the Boston Celtics have been throughout this whole season. Is this one of the greatest teams of all time? Not much of that was being talked about going into these finals, and now that it's done, who cares? Who cares now? Y'all failed to hype it up. And it's small things as well. I think a growing conversation on the timeline these last couple of days too is just the presentation in the finals being so lackluster. Shout out to Kofi because he made a video about this. The small shit, bro. The small shit. I don't think it's the specific trophy, the Larry O.B. being in the center court that's the problem. But I think it's the premise of because y'all did it this season with the in-season tournament. Why does the NBA Finals court look the same as a court in January as a court in the first round? Just have something on there to signify that, this is the NBA Finals. You know what I'm saying? Why aren't we having bigger events, more spotlight on the player intros? That used to be a thing. I remember what the NBA Finals looked like in 2010, hell, even 2011. What happened to these things? You know what I'm saying? I suggested this on my stream last night. Why is the halftime show just something that we just kind of skip over? Like, I understand if you're in the game. You know, when I go to an NBA playoff game, halftime is when I, go to the bathroom. Halftime is when I try to get food for the second half. But why not, if you're the NBA, invest time into, having a better halftime performance? I'm done seeing these dogs run around there on the court. I'm done seeing, respect to her, Red Panda going out there and flipping the cups on top of her head. It is impressive every time I see it. But can we have if it's a 5-game series, halftime show, I'm gonna just name names. I understand this is probably not feasible. Game 1, you got Rihanna at halftime. Game 2, you got J. Cole. Game 3, you got Beyonce. Game 4, you got Lil Uzi. And then Game 5, you got Drake. I understand, maybe like a tier lower than that. But these are things that I feel like the NBA should invest in my opinion. Or at least give the individual teams the budget to invest, in a more spectacular halftime show. People are talking about the halftime show as well, in terms of the analysis just barely being there. It's just a bunch of ads being played. NBA presentation is not what it used to be. Everyone's complaining about just ads being spammed up. They're not really caring about the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, all of these things, it doesn't look like the NBA really cares about the presentation anymore, which is weird because they did for the in-season tournament, but for the grand stage of them all, where you're going to get your highest viewership for the regular for the whole season, because this is the pinnacle of the season, why are you not putting in the same effort? Like, it actually makes no sense to me. I also think the NBA has just done a really poor job of marketing this next generation of stars. Like I said earlier, the conference finals was being led by a bunch of stars under 25, and it really put the pressure on the NBA to market these dudes, and they just wasn't ready. They understand that Steph Curry is still in the league. They understand that a guy like KD, a guy like LeBron is still in the league. But imagine still being reliant on Kobe Bryant and marketing Kobe Bryant when he was 35. Like, that's a crazy concept. You know what I'm saying? Like, so what is that setup? What is that segue to the next generation of stars? And the NBA just hasn't figured it out. I think these guys have been way too short-minded when it comes to marketing. I also think to a certain degree, LeBron has kind of fucked up the NBA's plans and their traditional workflow because of how his longevity has been. You know what I'm saying? I think LeBron was really supposed to start slowing down after 2016, after 2015, but he just kept on going. He continued to be the biggest star in the league, to the point where the NBA was forced to keep on marketing LeBron. And again, with the attention being the same, the amount of attention that we can consume being the same, that did take away from marketing a Giannis, from marketing a Luka when he came into the league, from marketing, hell, even a KD, a Russell Westbrook, a James Harden. It did take away from that. So that is an unfortunate reality of things. I think the NBA Finals also just hasn't had good matchups, right? If you want to discount 2020 and 2021 as just the COVID years, that's fine. The years prior to that was the super team era finals, and if you want to credit that to the super teams, that's fine as well. But outside of 2022, which was a good year for ratings for the NBA, we've had back-to-back years of 5-game series. Right? 5-game series. And specifically this year, a lot of these games were lopsided on both ends of it. The only the real close games was Game 2 and Game 3, which did have viewership, but I believe Game 2, the Celtics were still up by 20 or 15 at some point. Like, the Mavs still had to come back from a pretty big lead. Game 4 was the Mavs blowout. Game 3 was a pretty close game. Game 1 was a blowout. And then Game 5 was a blowout. You know what I'm saying? Like, just these last 2 seasons, there have been a lot of blowouts. It's been lopsided NBA Finals, and I don't think that's good for ratings at all. I read someone tweet about it. When it comes to these ratings, NBA ratings typically peak at the end of games. I'm not even going to lie to y'all. There are a couple of games in the regular season, or a decent amount of regular games in the regular season, where I was just box score watching, seeing if it was going to be a blowout until the fourth quarter. And then if it was a close game in the fourth quarter, I would then tune in. And I feel like a lot of casual NBA fans do the same thing. You know what I'm saying? You either got the fan who watches the whole game regardless of what's happening. You got the fan that watches the game from the start, and then when it's a blowout, they leave. And you also got the fan who doesn't watch the game until the second half. And if it's not a close game, they're just not going to turn on the game at all. You know what I'm saying? And when you have lopsided series like this, that's a problem. That's a problem. I think also the disparity in the conferences have really been kind of showing their ass. You know, the East was weak this season. It was weak last season. And by the time, you know, the Miami Heat made it to the finals, we all knew Denver was outmatching them. I think this season it was kind of in the reverse. So I can't really pull that card this season. But the conference situation, I think that's also playing a factor in this as well. You know what I'm saying? When one side of the conference is so much more competitive than the other, it doesn't really give you much incentive to watch the weaker conference as well. And that does affect these average numbers that we're talking about. And in 2024, I also cannot lie, man. Xenophobia is a part of this. Xenophobia is a part of this. The reason why Luka didn't get the push that he did, the reason why, you know, people don't really care about Luka in these finals, there is a level of xenophobia that has been pretty rampant and pretty obvious in the NBA community. Like, people really showed their ass once Anthony Edwards started getting hype. Guys like Nick Young talking about, you know, the NBA is back in American hands. Like, it'd be one thing to acknowledge that, you know, an American star is a problem for the NBA, but to genuinely be happy that the best star in the league is now American, I think is a little bit weird to me, to really come out and say, yeah, fuck these Euros. Big America. Like, it's just showing the problems. That's what I'm saying. Like, shit like that is showing the problems in terms of marketing. People like Gilbert Arenas downplaying Jokic as much as he did this season. Even, you know, in years past, the NBA media downplaying Giannis's years, downplaying Jokic's dominance. And also, a part of it as well is top players not caring about the game. You know how Jokic and Luka carry themselves. I don't think that's good for the league as well. The All-Star game not being as good as it used to be, I think that's a part of these things as well. The NBA product as a whole right now has a lot of problems that it can fix. Has a lot of problems that it should fix. But nevertheless, let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below, though. Why do y'all think the NBA ratings are as down as they are? And I understand, like I said in the beginning of this video, this is a multifaceted issue. But what do y'all think is the biggest contributor into this? For me specifically, I do think it's just the marketing of the next generation that I think the NBA has really messed up. I don't think they marketed these big time players as well as they should have. And I don't think they're trying hard enough. But with that being said, let me know what y'all think. And I'm out, man. Peace.